And welcome back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. We keep it simple, we keep it real, and we keep it honest. The first timer here, or you've seen the show a couple of times, you know we try to do stories with a Parker twist, whether it's a well known story or a story that people just don't know about. If you have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly. It's parkerman2011 at gmail.com, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. You can text me, leave a voicemail. Telephone number is 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. And everybody's talking about this Fani Willis Donald Trump case. It's going crazy now. And we're kind of forgetting the reason for this case. And it was pretty much to see about charging Donald Trump and 14 other people for charges as far as trying to get votes out there to help him win in Georgia. That was the initial case. Now it's pretty much saying, excuse me, that Fani Willis and Nathan Bradley had an affair or relationship while they're doing this case, and some saying it's a conflict of interest. So we're talking about that now. And as we're talking about this, one of the people that we're kind of talking about, we talk about Terrence Bradley, the guy that seems to be giving up everything. But what about Ashley Merchant? She recently was in front of a Senate hearing, and you wonder, okay, what's the purpose of the Senate hearing? Well, they're there pretty much to ask more questions. Okay. And so she recently had her hearing session, and it was about 3 hours. And how did you view that if you did view that? Did you look at it as, okay, she spilled the beans too? Did you look at it as, wow, this lady is really ingrained, or maybe she's not that good? Because throughout the case, when she was in front of the judge, she seemed a little flustered. Excuse me. But when she was doing the Senate hearing, it looks like she did pretty good. So throughout the show, we're going to talk about the indictment, why they're trying to indict Fani, Senator Jones going toe to toe with Miss Merchant. We're going to talk about the trips. We're going to talk about the cell phone process, Cell Hawk and Cell Bright, the love nest, as one of the people in the hearing said. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to give a little background on Ashley Merchant. So who is she? So she's the attorney for Michael Roman. He's one of the 19 co-defendants originally indicted in the Donald Trump case. So his background, because he's the one that said, you know what, let me give some information to see if these attorneys are doing the right thing. So he's a Philadelphia GOP operative. Don't know what that means. Operative sounds kind of secretive. Who is director of election day operations for Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. So he faces 7 charges, including multiple conspiracy charges. The charges stem from several events, including his alleged role in the Trump alternate elector scheme. So he's been one of the lesser known people in this case, but he brought the motion to national attention not too long ago to disqualify Willis, alleging the relationship between Willis and Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade was ultimately acknowledged by both in a series of extraordinary hearings. That's interesting on the motion. So how did he find out about that, this Roman guy? So at question now is the disqualification saga. When the relationship began, did this relationship between Wade and Willis begin before she took the case? Or did it begin after she took the case? And if there was some money tied into this, as you know, Miss Willis and Mr. Wade, they have no receipts for anything. Some people are saying that is there double dipping involved? So let's say they become boyfriend and girlfriend after Trump. That may not be as bad in some people's eyes, but then some people say if they became boyfriend and girlfriend before the case, and she says, wow, you know, Nathan, I got this opportunity. I want to give you a chance to be my partner. I'm going to pay you this much. And if I give you this, all I want is something else in return. I'll help make you rich. You help make me rich. They're saying that that's a form of racketeering. It's interesting. So we're going to go over this case with, Ashley. And we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about Ashley. So you're watching, again, keeping it honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander. And we're going to be talking about the Senate hearing and how did Ashley do. But rest assured, when Senator Jones comes in, they're going to be going toe to toe, and we're going to give our commentary throughout it. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully, you pick up something out of this, which I have too. So periodically, we're going to talk while this is going on. We'll stop it and talk, but you'll get a chance to hear what Ashley did, and did Ashley kind of throw Terrence Bradley under the bus. But here's the story.
Yes. Yeah. But Mr. Bradley told me at that first meeting that they would meet at hotels. He told me about a lot of travel. I mean, he detailed, he detailed a lot of stuff. He said that they traveled to Texas, they traveled to Florida, just, a lot of different travel. He said Belize. He specifically said Belize, a cruise, the Bahamas, things like that.
And you were later able to verify that through other subpoenas or open records request or whatever?
Yes, I was. I was able to, I subpoenaed bank records, I subpoenaed credit card records, and then I actually subpoenaed the travel agencies that Mr. Wade used for some of those trips. He used two of the cruises that they took, he used a travel agency. So there was a cruise to the Bahamas I got through a travel agency. There was a trip to Aruba that I got through the travel agency. And then there was another cruise, I think that one's to the Bahamas also, that I got through a different travel agency. And then his credit cards are the ones that showed all the Belize trips.
And they showed that he was buying the tickets for both himself and Miss Willis.
Oh, yes. The credit card statements. So because I guess he used a travel agency, his credit card statements actually had her name and seat number and all that on it.
Okay.
So, there was no disputing.
Clear it was paid for by him on his credit cards?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Is this the document you gave us from the Capital One there?
It is. Yes. And there you can see. So Clara Bowman is Mr. Wade's mom. So this was the cruise that happened October 31st, around that date. Mr. Wade paid for Miss Willis, Mr. Wade, and then his mother's plane tickets, and then also their cruise receipt. I think that one was Royal Caribbean.
And so with this is one of the documents that they say that Nathan used. And so I guess he was truthful in that when he said, he took his mom and Fanny. But the question is, and is it really a question? Does it matter where he got this money from to go on a trip?
Okay. So your summary here showing the trips, we know that
we're going to speed it up a little bit because
cases, the CellHawk data that you just showed, that is geolocation data. That is different from the Cellbrite.
So what she's talking about is the CellHawk and the Cellbrite, how they got the locations. That's interesting. So you think about this. So these two companies, CellHawk and Cellbrite, and they use this in court cases. I'm not an attorney. Okay. But whenever they want to find out where people have gone, they use a CellHawk and they use a Cellbrite to back up maybe their false claims of as if they hadn't been there, which Wade and also Fanny has said they weren't at certain places. So the courts use a CellHawk and Cellbrite to find out exactly where they were.
So there's two different programs. CellHawk is the program that does geolocation data. Essentially what you do is you get all of the pings. So every time your phone, you see those cell phone towers everywhere. Every time you use your phone, it's trying to find the closest tower. So in a metro area like this, there's a lot of towers. That's why we get good signals. So when he's in Hapeville, there's a lot of towers. So we can really, really narrow it down. So what we had our investigator do, and I'm only talking about the geolocation stuff. I'll talk about the text in a minute. But what we had our investigator do was narrow it down. We got all the raw data and we had him narrow down, and we actually excluded a ton of things that were not right on top of this location. Like we wanted to be very, very careful just to have what was literally right on top of this location. So he created a geolocation fence, which
The location you're talking about is Miss Yerdy's condo.
yes,
Okay.
it is Miss Yerdy's condo.
And Miss Yuri was also a former employee of Miss Willis and also one of her friends. And from what we found out later on, that Fanny and Nathan would also go over to her house. And she was the one that said Fanny and Nathan had a relationship in 2019.
That area. So he was able to find, essentially, just to summarize a couple of the things, where he, Mr. Wade would call Miss Willis at midnight, something like that. And then all of a sudden his phone would travel, and you can actually watch it. When you do the live Cellhawk, the app, it's pretty cool. You can actually watch the phone travel, and it's pinging because you're using it. If you have an app open, your phone's pinging. So my phone's pinging right now because I'm sure I have an app open. So it's pinging from his house all the way down to the condo at midnight, 1 a.m. And he calls her when he gets there. And then it goes silent for 4 or 5 hours. And then, early in the morning hours, he starts pinging again, driving back, and then he texts her when he gets home.
So she's pretty much saying that they had technology to let you know that Mr. Wade was over Fanny's house overnight. And then he contacted her when he got home.
So,
And this is before he gets hired in November of 21.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and there's a couple different ones, and I would defer to the experts on the Cellhawk data, but that's the summaries based on what we had him do. And again, we try to be very, very narrow. There were a lot of dates that it looked like it happened also, but maybe he was bouncing off a different location. And so we wanted to be very narrow.
So is that why y'all asked him in the hearing, how many times had you been to this you already kind of have the data on him?
Well, so that's an interesting point. All we have as defense lawyers is the right to subpoena evidence. I have to have an evidentiary hearing to do that. I could not issue a subpoena for AT&T for this evidence until I had a hearing date. So, and it takes a while to get this stuff. We got it that morning. So, the morning of the hearing, and obviously I'm kind of busy doing the hearing. We got that data. My paralegal was literally trying to download it for the investigator at the time and get it over. We knew we had the data, but we didn't know what it showed.
So the day of the court, they had the information already. And like she said, usually it takes a long time, but it took one day. So they got the data the day of the court. So, and I don't know, so we'd have to go back to that. When they're asking Fanny and Nathan questions, well, were you there? How many times did you guys get together? And like, oh, we got together maybe 4 times, but the data shows 12, and these are lying.
So at that time, we didn't know, what it showed really until he was able to do the analysis. We had some preliminary reports from him, but nothing. I mean, it took a lot of hours. It's a lot of data. So it takes a lot of time to pinpoint this information.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I was talking about, so this is the Cellhawk report, and heat map is just like how many times it's pinging. Heavy concentration is you're talking a lot at this time, or you're at that location a lot. There's a lot of usage. The other thing I was talking about, just to make sure it's clear, so that's Cellhawk. Cellbrite is a different program. Cellbrite, and it's CELLEBRITE. Cellbrite is a program similar to Cellhawk, but it downloads data in the phone. So like this one is you pinging off of towers. It's geolocation.
Showing where you were
Exactly.
at a certain time.
Cellbrite actually can get your texts, your pictures, your app usage. I mean, all of that stuff.
So man, you look at that, Cellbrite can get anything and everything you have on this phone. So even if you delete it, Cellbrite, which I guess is used with authorities, can pick up everything off your phone. Wow. I don't know if that's good or bad to tell people.
So it's one of those things that if you want, if a defendant is threatening someone by text and they delete it, they'll take their phone and hook it up to Cellbrite. Cellbrite it makes what's called a forensic copy of the phone, but you can also limit the data. So it's very expensive program. So not a lot of people have it. So when I have my clients use it, costs a lot of money for them to have it done, but the DA's office has it. They have the software, they pay for it. You can find that in their open checkbook. The city of Atlanta police have it as well. But what you can do is you can copy cell phone. So, what I had mentioned earlier is
You have to have the cell phone to do that?
you do. You have to have the
So
cell phone.
what, did Mr. Bradley give you all his cell phone? Or
No.
how'd you get Mr. Wade's cell phone?
So we did not get that data from Mr. Wade. So we only got the geolocation data from Mr. Wade. I do not have the power to get the text messages. I don't have that power. I would have to have a search warrant. The state's the only one that has the power to actually get someone's text messages out of their phone.
So did Mr. Wade give the courts his phone and then they took it from there?
But my whole point in saying that was if I had been accused of having an affair and it didn't start, and I said it started in April and someone else said it started in November, they have the ability. I don't have the ability. They have the ability to plug that phone into the Cellbrite and print out a report
Right.
that shows all of the texts.
So Mr. Wade and Ms. Willis, had they wanted to disprove your allegations, could have just used that Cellbrite program and it would have shown no communications between them.
Yes.
So then that's interesting. So instead of the courts using the Cellbrite, excuse me, if Fanny and Nathan wanted to show their innocence and that they weren't anywhere around each other, they could have used that themselves. Now it's interesting because with courts and from what I saw and heard RICO cases sometimes, they use this phone data to let people know where they were at, if they were in that area or not. So supposedly, Fanny and Nate should have known this, but if they're being investigated, maybe they didn't think about that because they use it to investigate other people.
And it would have also showed the contents of the text. If the texts are romantic, if they're not romantic, if they're friendly, and they would control the data. So if there's something that was privileged, they could redact it. If there was something that, if they wanted to only limit it to we want to prove that we weren't talking romantically in November, they could
So
limit
they
it
could
to
have
that.
actually pulled up the text itself to say, hey, I need you to help me work on this case, or else, hey, I need you to meet me at the Love Nest.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
So meeting you at the Love Nest, which we talked about. So technically they could have used this, got the program themselves and deleted everything and then gave it to the court as proof. And it'd be up to the courts to say, well, you know what? We want to use our own.
I don't have that ability. So I don't have the ability to get a search warrant and get that data. All I have the ability to do is get that geofencing.
Well, who found out about these 12,000 texts and calls and all that kind of stuff?
That is what I was able to get by subpoena. So I was able to get the geolocation data by subpoena. What I can't get is what's inside of the phone. I can't get the texts inside the phone.
The word.
So it's interesting. She can get the location of where they were at with the phone, but she couldn't get the text that's inside the phone and pictures.
Words in the text.
Exactly.
But you were able to find out that they were texting each other
Oh, yeah.
prior to November 1st of 21.
Yes.
How
And
did you find that data? Is that anything you've produced to us?
that is so the CellHawk data actually analyzes that. So you can see, and we just summarized 2021. So approximately 12,000 interactions, that's voice and texts for the year of 2021. And again,
12,000 conversations for 2021 between Nathan and Fanny. Wow.
remember 2021, he didn't get the contract until November of that year.
Right.
So most of 2021, he's not under contract. To over 2,000 voice calls, almost 10,000 text messages.
How did they?
2,000 voice calls and almost 10,000 text messages. Wow. So if they weren't working together, like he says, how do you explain that?
Explain that. Did you confront? We're not privy to what all came out in evidence at the hearings that you've had. Did you get either one of them to say, that's not true, we didn't really talk 12,000 times? Or
No, what they did was they filed an affidavit saying that geolocation data is not always reliable.
So they're saying it's not always reliable, but they do use these in court cases.
does that apply to Cellbrite data though?
No, it doesn't. And it was ironic because I have a number of cases. I mean, almost every murder case I've had in the last decade has had geolocation data.
Used by the prosecution against the defendant, right?
They use CellHawk data. I mean, literally, they're using this right now. So our investigator actually analyzed the same. There's a trial going on. It's called the YSL trial. There's this same data being used in that trial, and our investigator actually analyzed it for them in that case. So
So that's interesting. So in Fannie's office, they do use that, and the person that is using it on another case is using it on this case, but yet Fannie is saying it's unreliable.
Oh, I mean,
For them, you mean for the Fulton County DA's office?
no, for the defense looking at
defense.
that data. So the point is they're currently using the same data in another courtroom to prosecute someone, but their defense in our case was that it's not reliable.
Got it. And did your Cellbrite data come in? The existence of the cell phone calls?
No, so the Cellbrite data, that would have to be voluntary on part of the DA to actually
So they
voluntarily.
could show you that to disprove your allegations?
100%.
Okay, didn't do it?
No.
Neither Wade nor Willis?
No.
Okay. All right, so you've done,
So that was the nuts and bolts of putting together the cell phone records. Let me know what you think of that. So Fannie and Nate, with this little bit right now, do you think they're hiding something? Boy, I mean, you can tell that Natalie, she puts in a lot of work. Speaking of work, you're watching. Yours truly, keeping it honest, with Anthony Parker Alexander. And if you have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly at parkerman2011@gmail.com, parkerman2011@gmail.com. Give me a call, leave a message, 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. Let me know what you think of this so far. We're trying to put a little spin on this. We're trying to take our time to do this, and also to see how Ms. Merchant is doing. Again, we're going to talk about Fannie getting indicted, the love nest, as they call it. Okay, I like that. And Senator Jones, yes. So let's get back to this. And the next subject, they've done the investigation as far as the cell phones and location. What now?
done your investigation, you've determined you think there was a relationship that had begun before he was hired.
Yes.
And after having met with Mr. Bradley,
Mhm.
you began to prepare a motion to disqualify and to dismiss the case altogether, right?
Yes. I actually started the motion
Let me
in
get back on
September.
the cell phone.
and then added to
text
it.
messages. All right, and
So listen to this backstory with Mr. Bradley, Terrence Bradley. It's interesting because this guy got up on the stand, and the first day he just kind of talked a little bit, spilled a little bit of beans. The second day he clammed up. A lot of people wondering why, but he was very comfortable talking to Ashley.
so then you somehow preserved, you had text communications with Mr. Bradley to confirm this.
Yes.
And was that because you didn't want to file a pleading that was inaccurate?
100%.
You wanted him to verify the accuracy of what you were claiming had happened?
I did not want to say one word that had not been verified.
Because he was the source.
Yes.
He's the guy that was his law partner and his divorce attorney,
Yes.
who probably knew as well as anybody in the state.
They had been best friends also.
Okay. All right. And so let's pull these up, Senator Dolezal. When did you start? You kept these text messages somehow?
I did. So I actually, Mr. Bradley uses a Android, I believe. And so it was not easy to just download them. And I'm not the most tech savvy person. There's a lot of texts that just went into things that I thought would just embarrass people and weren't relevant. So what I did was I screenshotted the texts that I thought were relevant. I tried to use those in court, but the prosecutor kept objecting and saying I was hiding things because I wasn't showing all of my text. So they just kept on and on for days saying I was hiding things. And I explained to them, I let them look through my phone. They scrolled through all my texts.
Who's they?
It was Adam Abadi was the prosecutor.
Okay.
So he just kept saying, that where's the beginning of that text? Where's the thing after that? Where's the other part of that text? These aren't complete, rule of completeness, kept objecting. And I had just screenshotted the texts that I thought were highly relevant, but weren't slanderous, I guess. I don't even know the word, but there were some that Miss Willis's daughter had failed out, like things like that. They were just ugly. They didn't need to be admitted.
Oh, yeah, I read that. We
I
don't
had
need to
just,
go there.
so I had tried really hard to just screenshot the relevant ones, but they kept saying that I was hiding stuff and I wasn't showing the whole thing. So when they objected to my text coming in the screenshots, they said they wanted the whole text chain, and the judge ordered me to, if I was going to admit the text, to go figure out a way to download all of them. So I bought a program for $20-$30 and took 3 hours. And I was very proud of myself for finally figuring out how to do it. But I was able to make a copy of it and then redact our phone numbers. So this actually showed like when they're read, when they're viewed.
What were you, all right, so up there on January 5th at 9:50 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking, what do you, read the question.
So I'm asking him, do you think it started before she hired him?
You're talking about the affair.
Yes, the affair.
And what's his response?
His response was absolutely.
So when he said absolutely on the text, it shows that he knew when they had the affair. When he was on the stand, he said pretty much he couldn't recall. And so that's when she brought up these text messages.
Started when she left the DA's office and was judge in South Fulton. And so, these are things that he had told me, but I was getting ready to file. My filing deadline was the 8th. And as we're doing this, I'm fact checking line by line, basically.
Right. So did you send him a copy of your proposed motion?
I did. And I actually admitted, so at the hearing that we had, I was able to admit the email where I sent him that. So I sent him a copy of the motion that weekend when I was I wanted him to review it. And then he had a text. He didn't write me back by email, but I submitted my email so that the court could see exactly when I sent it and when he responded. And then he responded that everything looked good. Because I asked, I said, I'm sending you this motion. I need you to look at it. And then he responded that everything looked good in it.
Right.
He actually told me at first he wanted me to make some changes because I had not included the information about how much money he had received. I had only included the information about how much Wade had received. And, I didn't know that it wasn't really highly relevant to my motion. But he was like, oh, that's going to tip them off that I'm talking to you. And he did not want anybody to know that he was talking.
So if he didn't want anybody to know he was talking, why was he talking?
He was very concerned about what.
I'm going to let
happened.
you just read through this chain.
Okay.
All right. We left off up there. Absolutely. It began before it began when she was a judge in South Fulton. When was she a judge in South Fulton?
She became a judge in August of 2019. And I did an open records. I first asked.
And this is fascinating. She's an aggressive, astute lawyer talking about Ashley.
Actually, I first did an open records and they said no. So then I subpoenaed the records for the judicial conference, the municipal court conference.
So she was a municipal court judge.
They were both municipal court judges. So I got the
Who's both? You mean Wade was the judge at the time also?
Wade was a judge. He was actually a speaker on the panel. It was October 2019. So I found online an old agenda where he was speaking, and Terrence Bradley had told me that they met at a conference where Wade was speaking and Willis had gone. So I knew that. So and it was in person. So I could narrow it down because of COVID. I figured out when COVID happened and when, all the conferences went virtual, narrowed down my timeline. So I searched for this specific time period, which is when Bradley had told me the relationship started.
Right.
So Willis met Nathan at this conference that he was one of the speakers. So if you go to what if Willis didn't make it to that conference, where would she be at now?
And when was that conference?
It was October 2019.
Right.
So I found the agenda for that. So then I reached out to the municipal court judges CLE group and said, here's an open records request. I would like a list of attendees because I wanted to verify Miss Willis went there because I was trying to fact check. And they said no. So I subpoenaed them and they gave it to me. I also subpoenaed.
Was she in attendance?
She was.
Where was that conference?
It was at Lake Lanier.
Okay.
I also did an open records request to the city of South Fulton because I know that they have to sign off if your judge is going to go to a conference. So I did an open records request to them to make sure that they had actually sent her to that. So I verified from 2 different sources that she attended that conference, and that matched what Mr. Bradley had told me.
All right. So is that a part-time job, a municipal court job, a judge?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
So Wade could continue practicing law and do that on the side.
so she was a full-time, but Wade is a part-time, and Wade only did maybe once or twice a month at most. And
Okay.
because he was in the city of Marietta. I mean, he was just he was a fill-in judge for that. That wasn't his.
Okay, so you
Primary job.
narrowed it down to that's when the relationship began. Scroll through here for us, and I can't read that green right.
That's
What's the
okay.
next? If you don't mind, just sort of
No,
read
of
us
course.
through.
It says, is this accurate? And this was again on
So when
January.
you're saying, is this accurate? You're going over this brief and saying, I'm about to swear this in court. Will you verify it's accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
So at that time I was going through the actual statement because I was trying to figure out how to say it, and so I said, upon information and belief, Willis and Wade met while both were serving as magistrate judges and began a romantic relationship at that time. And he corrected me and said, no, it was municipal court.
You had said magistrate court, and he said no.
Right.
Okay.
And I slipped up. I should have said municipal court. I knew that.
So you say thank you. What was his response after that? Now this is 12-something p.m. on January 5th as you're getting your pleading ready.
He said, you can't put where they met. Not many people know that. I might be one of only, not even Chris Campbell.
Chris Campbell was their other law partner.
Yes.
Okay.
And I did not disclose Mr. Bradley in my initial filing. I didn't until the state forced me to.
Why was he afraid to be disclosed? Just because of his relationship with Wade, or?
So he really didn't want to be put in this, that he knew about the relationship. Wow.
Was he afraid of these people, or just didn't want to betray
Multiple
them, or what?
multiple reasons. I mean, it's the district attorney in Fulton County. I didn't really want to go, file something against her. It's not exactly a fun position to be in. Also, I mean, they have a lot of mutual friends. I'm sure it wasn't a fun position to be in, to be outing a friend of yours, but the attacks, I mean, it's a small legal community,
And if Terrence is outing him and it's a small legal community, didn't he think somebody would know and it would come back and hurt him?
Were you able to get this into court? Because Bradley, I saw some of his testimony, all of a sudden can't remember anything about anything now. Were you able to use this to impeach him and show that he did know precisely what happened and when?
Yes, and he changed his testimony somewhat. At first, when he first testified, he testified that he had never discussed this with me. And
Then you showed his text message where y'all discussed it.
well, at that point, I that caught me off guard. So, I didn't expect that. So then I pulled my text messages, and I had some screenshots of them just in case. And I told his lawyer, do you want to look at my text messages? And so then he later came back and testified that yes, he had.
So that's interesting because he put all these text messages out there, and when she had him in front, sitting on the stand, who was more surprised? Was it Terrence because she was asking him questions, or was it Ashley because he wasn't answering the questions? Which one backstabbed each other more?